Vivimos en una crisis de confianza. Lo vemos todos los días entre empresarios y su gobierno, entre distintos sectores de la sociedad. Como mexicanos hemos perdido la capacidad de confiar en nosotros. Una organización que se llama Edelman mide los niveles de confianza en el mundo todos los años. Y Kevval Hannah, su vicepresidenta senior para Impacto Social, platicó con nosotros sobre eso y muchas cosas más. Además, Kevval es una emprendedora pública con muchos años de experiencia creando alianzas entre sectores público, filantrópico, académico y social para mejorar la calidad de vida de los que menos tienen. Escúchenla. Kevval Hannah, great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you, Arturo.
Excellent. Look, I'm fascinated by people's journeys, by personal journeys that take them from their place of origin. In your case, the beautiful Bahamas, to experience other countries and other cultures. And I just wanted to start with yours. So tell us about what's driven you so far and how did you get to where you are?
Awesome. So again, thank you for the invitation. My name is Kevval Hannah. I am from the beautiful islands of the Bahamas. And what that meant was I was always thinking about how does this small island nation with a high level of human capital, with beautiful resources, et cetera, how do we actually survive in this world? And from where I sat, I saw a lot of economic development initiatives that some worked and some didn't. And so that always kind of was clicking in my mind. How can we best bring the public, private, and social sector together to solve some of these complex issues? And with that in mind, I dove into a career into global development. I started off at the World Bank, trying to answer these questions around social development, around inclusion, access, et cetera, but always thinking about it from a collaborative mindset. Again, bringing the best talent, resources, assets to the table that the private sector, the public sector, and the social sector could really bring together. And so if you look at my journey, it is always really touching on that North Star of impact and social impact. And really at the end of the day, how do we bring people to the table? Or maybe we don't have to build a table. Maybe it's something else. And so that's really been my trajectory over the years with that mindset.
Yeah, and I love the theme of partnerships. I think if there's ever a time where we've needed to bring everyone together to solve some of the world's toughest challenges, including climate change and inequality, I think that is the time. The time is today, particularly for a country like Mexico. For over a decade, we've been using this term social entrepreneur, which I guess is another way of describing how to apply the skills of the private sector to solve the challenges that we were just talking about. Mm-hmm. But I recently discovered this other term, public entrepreneur. And in fact, your previous organization, the Center for Public Impact, defines it as someone who's innovating for the public good, so in the public sector. And I think that's something that we drastically need in Latin America and in Mexico, public sector innovation. So before we go into your current job, tell us a little bit about the work that you did at CPI, one of those innovations that you and I worked on for a few years, is this notion of building inclusive economies. And so tell us a little bit about what the idea was there and what you learned with this project.
So first of all, this concept of government, right? And how do we make government work better, and the vision of government? How do we reimagine government? It sounds very pie in the sky. But at the end of the day, when we think about what the government does, they have the assets, they have the people, they have the incentive to do better in terms of their principles, their ideals, their values, et cetera. And so I came to the Center for Public Impact because it had this lofty vision of reimagining what it is to be for government. But it did it through, I think, very specific tactical, practical solutions. One was through building legitimacy. The second pillar that I was really invested in was around inclusive economies. And the third was, again, around city innovation. These things are not, again, in silos. It's really thinking about the whole entire ecosystem of what a city or a country could be. And at CPI, we had the opportunity to work together on the Built for All framework. And it was really funny because we started off talking about inclusive growth. And then we took a step back and we said, actually, growth is unequal in many places. I mean, billions of people being lifting out of poverty, but when you take a step back, it's uneven in a lot of different places. And so I love that we kind of moved from this idea of what traditional economists are thinking about inclusive growth, but moving into inclusion. And everyone was talking about inclusive recovery with COVID, inclusive this and inclusive that. And we were like, let's make it practical and actionable. And I love that it was really seeded from what we saw, what was happening in that day and time, and didn't just go ahead and push forward with inclusive growth.
And then you didn't just stop at kind of writing a new thesis. And I remember we interviewed really interesting people. We sat with Nobel Prize winners, but we also sat with community organizers. We sat with people from the left. We sat with people from the right. And we were asking them the same question. If you were to rebuild the economy from scratch, just kind of like a blank slate, start thinking about what an economy is, who does it serve, who gets to participate, how would you do it? And I think that that's a great use of brilliant minds, but also kind of a bottom-up process. But then you took Built for All on a roadshow in the United States. So tell us a little bit about what you learned in actually talking to city planners, to local organizers, to mayors, to community leaders.
I think one of the things practitioners always ask, well, that's great, you have a framework. Well, so what? What does this mean to me? Do you have other examples out there? And so essentially our team took the 3 pillars of Built for All, around equitable access to resources and opportunities, the second around this level playing of competition, and then the last about this collective stewardship of shared resources for future generations. And we found some cities that fit into those pillars. Essentially, we started off with just a conversation. What does an inclusive economy mean for you, city of Kansas City? What does an inclusive economy mean for you, Denver? And really went through and asked those questions of, well, what are your obstacles? Where do you see the opportunities? Give us some examples of what you're doing already. And so what we were able to pull from that was cities are actually doing really smart, fascinating things around inclusive economies, but essentially no one is hearing it. And so some of the things we heard was we need to create spaces for learning and connecting, for networking, for sharing this information, for building up the capability and capacity of local government leaders who are really doing this work already on the ground. And, we found some very fascinating things. Like I'm thinking about Chattanooga. They're known as the city of the gigabyte city. And with them, they work with the public sector, as well as the social sector to bring during COVID, computers as well as cable access, as well as wireless access to the most underserved communities, so that kids could still go to school, elderly people could still get care, people could look for jobs, etc. So that's just really a smart, simple way of closing the digital divide, for example.
And that's public innovation, and it's also partnerships. And we started talking about that. So you've actually lived the experience. I'm quite jealous of the work that you were doing and that CPI is still doing in the United States, and of this kind of revolution of equity. We see new positions being created in local government, chief equity officer. Equity plans. Atlanta has an equity plan. How do we involve everyone in the economy? I wish that other countries south of the border would take note and maybe start applying some of these ideas and some of these principles. Let me turn to your current job at Edelman. Edelman is one of the leading communication firms in the world, and it creates every year this trust barometer. It's an annual survey that's been going on since the beginning of the century. And this year it included 32,000 people from 28 countries. What are some of the key results of the trust barometer this year?
Absolutely. So 23 years of doing this research, I think one of the things that we find really helpful is that we can see trends, right? So this year is really focusing on navigating a polarized world. And the 4 forces of polarization that we found were, one, it was around this distrust in institutions, specifically government. Thinking about the misinformation and the lack of information was another polarizing force. Secondly, there's a mass class divide, and we started talking about that within the Built for All work as well. And then fourth, when we look at the the relationship between institutions and where it be government, media, etc. It's very fractured in many ways. And so those four forces of kind of that lack of economic optimism, the mass class divide, this increase in disinformation, the third, looking at that imbalance between institutions. And then I think the fourth, the rising challenges around kind of cyclical distrust and discrimination, et cetera. I think those four trends have really kind of risen to the top. And what it says is that business, interestingly enough, continues to be a place where people trust it the most. And so what that means then is that business is expected to lead and to act.
Let me touch on that a little bit. Mm-hmm. So the private sector comes off as the most trusted institution amongst many categories, including government, media, even the social sector organizations. And so it creates a little window for the business community where society is looking at the entrepreneur or at the corporation for solutions to really, really important and urgent problems that we have. Is this an invitation for business to engage more? And how do you read it? And when you talk to your business clients that want to have social impact, or is there a cautionary tale? Is this just a bubble that might pop later on?
So a couple of things. At Edelman, I partner with global brands and companies who want to design and implement social impact and sustainability. And that really puts purpose at the heart of what they do and really builds trust between business and society. Again, building off what we've seen in the trust barometer. What that means then is that CEOs are really expected to take a stand. They're expected to play a role in strengthening the social fabric of our society. And they can actually do that without being politicized in many ways. They can stay in areas where they have competitive advantage. They can work on sustainability, DEI, looking at wages and reskilling, taking a stand in geopolitics, for example. And so, again, there are some simple measures that business can take. Again, staying in their lane, being true to their values and their principles, but again, taking a stand for their employees, their shareholders, and society writ large. And again, I think these are some really simple tactics that business can do to really bust through and take some space where there is the space currently right now. So there's definitely a window, and it's about creating and going through the window in the way that it feels right for you. It doesn't have to be contentious. It can actually be a connective and cohesive way of building our social fabric.
Building a social fabric or rebuilding a social fabric, I think, is one of the biggest challenges of our generation. A few years ago, I wrote a piece for the Woodrow Wilson Center that was about the economic cost of distrust. And the basic notion was that in a country like Mexico, for example, to vote for president in an election, it costs the taxpayer and the country 7 times more than a vote for president in the United States. And the reason that it costs 7 times more is because we don't trust each other. We don't trust our politicians. Politicians don't trust other politicians. The government doesn't trust the citizens. So we've got all of these transaction costs, completely unnecessary. From getting the elector card to all of the citizens that have to participate in the election, to a whole bunch of structures in the judicial system, etc., that add cost to that, right of a citizen to go and choose the next president. And you and I have talked about this coming out of Davos. There were a lot of conversations there about trust. Is there a recipe for rebuilding trust? It's all good to know how the trust levels are moving.
Yeah.
But is there a way that we can actually rebuild the social fabric?
Absolutely. And when you say we, I'll take it from every angle. I think for business, given the recent trust data, if you're really expected to take a stand and play a role in strengthening the fabric, then take a stand in terms of, finding simple measures for ESG, holding divisive forces accountable, defending facts, standing up to political bullies in a sense, publishing things on your own platform. and really working with and not against government. For example, if you look at living standards. So I think, again, business plays a role. Government, again, can collaborate with business to utilize those assets that they have in place that I saw at CPI, that the brilliance and the passion of public sector servants who are doing amazing things on the local level that may not always translate to the state or federal level. Philanthropy and the social sector their role has grown tremendously over the last 2 years in terms of the number of giving and their influence as well. But it's really about bringing those pieces together to create long-lasting change. And it all starts with, what problem are we trying to solve? And I think that's what's really important, instead of just throwing spaghetti at the wall, thinking, is it the social fabric of this country? Is it the social fabric of this group or this community? And then how has history and institutional factors played a role in that? It can't just be a utopian response. It really has to be that ecosystem response of inclusion and equity and access, and some reckoning as well around what we are working with.
So in a way, what you're saying, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing is that we all need to become, in a way, public entrepreneurs. We all need to care about what's happening in our society. And, we need to play a bigger role. We can leave it to other people to solve our problems and to build this confianza, this trust that we need for society to work. I'm going to come back to the beginning with this last question for you. I think of you, as I said, as a great public entrepreneur who creates partnerships and who's walked the walk across government, philanthropy, corporations, and as you said, with the aim of delivering social impact. What advice would you have for, say, a young entrepreneur in Mexico or a leader in a corporation who wants to have more purpose, who wants to have more impact, but might not want to leave the private sector, might be afraid of going, into the nastiness of government in our countries? And how does this overlap with social capitalism in your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, I think when you look at our generation of leaders and thinkers, they're already being they're activists. They really already stand behind brands and companies that they believe in. So I feel like that's actually naturally happening. Where I do think there's a couple of ways to really grow what it means to be, or shape what it means to be a public entrepreneur. There are three things that come up to mind. One, I started off my story with my North Star. Why I care about this, why this is important to me. And it started with coming from a small island nation, knowing that I had to survive and we had to create space. But I also knew there was beauty and strength in it. So I think the first thing is really figuring out what your why is. Secondly, taking an asset-based approach, right? It's not always, oh, I don't have this or I don't have that. We have this, I have that. And again, knowing your worth and your value and trying to apply that to the problems that you see in your community, the problems that you see in your world. So for instance, if you're a financial analyst, you're like, what can I do? Then maybe look at a board that you could join, or where you can provide your time and your energy and your skill set to help that NGO then deliver resources to the community. I think the third thing that's really important is go out there and create networks. That's one of the most powerful things that I learned at CPI, was that networks are amazing, and networks are really amazing in my job. I find different people are doing different things, and then we build and we innovate and we strengthen and we support each other. So I think those three things are important. Knowing your why, your North Star. Secondly, continuing to find ways to utilize your skills in ways that feel that fit for you. And the third is being a part of a network. So where it's a board or an NGO or association, et cetera. So that, again, social capital, I found, is really the differentiator in so many places and spaces in terms of getting opportunities, looking at leadership, having influence, and making change happen.
And if I could add a fourth, I would say trust the process. So it brings us back
trust the process. Trust the process. And every step it doesn't have to be something so big and amazing. It could be something simple as, now an NGO has the ability to make better choices of what grants they go after or not. Or as a community, as being a corporate citizen of the community, you can help increase public safety or increase the kinds of resources that are going into your community. It's about being active in the way that feels most natural to you. And that's how I advise my companies as well. Please don't go ahead and sign up for this, where people are going to say, that's not you. That's not a part of your DNA. That's not what you care about. Again, it's about that level of authenticity. And what I always say is, trust enables action, and action builds trust. And if we use that precondition for trust, then the system's going to be built for more and for all. And I think that really ties in well with our inclusive economy work.
Well, Kevval, I'm so pleased to have you in my network and to be doing this work together with you. Thank you so much for your time and for your ideas and for your passion and commitment to all things impact. And we'll see you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you very much.